Okay, so I'm just going to do a little talk, hopefully about 45 minutes or something, just to kind of introduce the theme of the week, which is the Greater Mandala. The source of it's online. You can find a chapter from a book called Wisdom Beyond Words, which Sangharakshita wrote about wisdom, and it's in a section on a Buddhist scripture called the Ratnaguna Samchaya, which is the verses on the accumulation of precious qualities. So this is one of the Perfection of Wisdom sutras. It's in there with the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, and it's specifically about how the Bodhisattva lives. So the Bodhisattva is the kind of altruistic Buddhist, really, who sit not just seeking enlightenment for themselves, but seeking it for everybody. So looks for the conditions that are going to bring about everybody's enlightenment at the same time. He or she doesn't kind of want to go there first. They want to bring everyone with them. So in the talks, in the chapter, Sangharakshita talks about the Perfection of Wisdom literature not being about. It's not intellectual, really. It seems very intellectual, but it's using the intellect to undermine the intellect, and it's not rather than just encouraging us to think about things. So he talks about silence being a more communicative mode than speaking, and he says if anything, there is even more communication at a more subtle level with silence than with speaking. We find more subliminal, and in that respect, more expressive modes come into the fore, involving the eyes, the face, gestures, and posture. We may even find that we can communicate our awareness of someone without looking at them. So I think sometimes we experience this when we go on retreat, that we're just kind of there in the same space, and there's just a sense of each other, and it's not like there needs to be that much kind of direct communication. So in a way, well, maybe that's a bit of something to think about for this week, just kind of that silence, just being silent more of the time, cutting down on input and, looking on the internet and whatever it is. And just kind of taking in nature a bit more, just taking in ourselves, taking in what's there. It's a bit like that meditation, just kind of like, what is my situation? Where am I? Where is this? Or have a body, remembering that, trying to let it support us. So all of this is like the Greater Mandala. So Sangharakshita talks about about awareness, like a Buddha's awareness being a warm thing, not a cold thing. And you get there are three basic words for wisdom in the Buddhist tradition. There's prajna, vidya, and jnana. So prajna is more the thinking side of things. So we kind of reflect on life, and we come up with a different view of things, or a better view of things. So that's prajna. And a Buddhist scholar called Herbert Gunter talks about this as analytical, appreciative understanding. So it's not just analytical, it's like somehow the emotions are in there as well. In fact, it's a bit like if you think that what we try, to get to enlightenment, you've got to take the whole of yourself there. So you've got to take your emotions there, and your intellect there, and your body there. So it's completely obvious, really, that you need to have. There's an emotional component to wisdom. There has to be one, because it's our emotions that really dominate things. We might think, oh yeah, I really want to get up and meditate tomorrow morning, but it's our emotions that probably dictate whether it actually happens or not. Our desires. So somehow we've got to kind of bring our desires on board. If we're going to kind of get anywhere, and particularly if we're going to get any kind of wisdom. And so in this chapter, he talks about loving kindness or metta as being like prajna, or it is prajna. So wisdom is loving kindness. So I'll come back to that later. I want to sort of try and explore what that might mean. The second type of wisdom is aesthetic appreciation, or vidya, and he talks about it as a sort of relishing of things, a harmony with the world. So it's a kind of wisdom that's more associated with intuition. So it's like you intuit that something feels right. Whereas with prajna, you kind of know that something is right, or you think it's right. It's more of this kind of aesthetic sense. So I suppose like maybe when we're dealing with poetry, this is more this kind of wisdom is more coming to the fore. So we need to kind of get into a sense of aesthetic appreciation towards life. And what we often have when we're kind of dealing with knowledge is like we're sort of very utilitarian about it. So we think he gives the example of seeing a tree, and an Indian friend said, "Oh, he says, what a magnificent tree," and his friend said, "Yeah, what a lot of firewood's in that tree." So it's a bit like we need to kind of just appreciate the things that are around us. And so a mandala is like, you get these Tibetan mandalas that have all sorts of Buddhas in them, or they're just kind of just shapes. And so a mandala is something like, it's a symbol, and in the center of the mandala is what's important. So it's a bit like, you might put a particular Buddha in the center of a mandala that you associate with, or a bodhisattva, like Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. If you want to kind of like really focus on that quality or developing that quality, but then that quality is then in relationship to other qualities like wisdom or like energy or whatever. So it's almost like if you're focusing on something, the other parts of the universe need to kind of come into relationship with that, around that. So a mandala is just a way of thinking about things in sort of two dimensions. So we can have a sense of our life having a mandala, being a mandala. So we put certain things in the center that we think are important, and then we're kind of aware of other things around them. And it can be quite helpful to do that, to just make a mandala of your life. What's happening, where do various bits of your life fit into that, and do you want them that close to the center, or do you want to put them further out? So the central message really of the talk is that what we normally do is we have aesthetic appreciation as something like a hobby, and then we do that a bit in the context of all our practical activity, which just kind of takes over most things. But what's being suggested here is that we do it the other way around. So the Bodhisattva has a sense of just aesthetic appreciation, just kind of enjoying life, enjoying the universe, enjoying people. Not wanting to get anything out of them, and then within all of that, within that kind of sense of appreciation, then they are active. So they do various things, and they're kind of very active. So they do lots of things to help beings, but they do it coming from a place which is sort of spacious and has this sense of it's like an aesthetic world, really. So it's like I'm just trying to kind of this is Sangharakshita's talk or his chapter. So what I wanted to do is to kind of just try and explore that a bit, how that might actually work more in our experience. How can we actually access this kind of greater mandala through our experience? And one of the things that I've focused a lot on in the last 10 years is a Buddhist teaching called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. So this is the central teaching of the Buddha on mindfulness. And so it's like it's as if, well, if we think about what what's the bottom line for being alive, for being a living being. Well, the bottom line is we're all sort of trying to find happiness and sort of escape from suffering. So that's a kind of universal thing, really. And, in a way, it's what all human activity is aiming at, It's like this sense of fulfillment. So people are, working in the city to get that, or they're doing social work to get that. But, if we think about it, well, what do you need to bring happiness about? What do you need? Well, you need two things, logically. You need to want it, so you need to want happiness for yourself and for others, which is the Metta-bhavana meditation, cultivation of the universal loving kindness. And you need to know how to bring it about. So how to bring it about is mindfulness. So in a scripture called The Questions of King Milinda, this Greek king was asked the question of a monk, Nagasena, what are the marks of mindfulness? And he says, well, the mark of mindfulness is that it sees what's bright and what's dark, what's lofty and what's low, and it takes hold of what's high and it lets go of what's low. So in a way, it sees what leads to happiness and lets go of what leads to suffering. So, when the Buddha talked about the four foundations of mindfulness, so it's these four here: body, feelings, mind, which includes the emotions, and views. He's saying, this is you. This is a human being. You are, the source of happiness and suffering. These four things are the source of happiness and suffering. So if you can bring awareness to them and turn them from being sources of suffering to being sources of happiness, then what you can do is you transform all the sources of suffering into sources of happiness. And this is called the direct path to nirvana. So it's like you become enlightened. So, for instance, if your body's in a tense state, it's a source of suffering. So you just try and relax it. But to do that, you have to kind of get into your body first of all. So this is what we did in the earlier meditation. With feelings, feelings are different. There's different types of feelings. There's feelings that come about through the body. They're called sensations. There's feelings that come about through the mind. So they're ethical or unethical feelings, conscience. And then there's feelings that come about through views. That's like a mood, So you think I'm a rubbish person, and you get depressed about it. So with feelings, you need to work out, well, what's the appropriate response to them that's going to bring happiness? So if you've got a difficult, painful sensation, you should try your best to work with your body to get rid of it. Pace yourself, pace your activity. If there's nothing you can do about it, it's better to accept it, which is working on your views, than it is to agonize about it. And this is called the first and second arrow. So you can then, make sensation a cause of happiness. If you're working on your views, well, if your views are out of line with reality, then that's going to give rise to particular feelings. So it says that the Buddha or an enlightened being doesn't experience a mood or doesn't experience mental feeling, because they don't. Whatever they experience is just how things are. So they're not complaining that this thing should be other than that. And then ethical and unethical feelings, they're called worldly feeling and spiritual feeling. So a worldly feeling is like your mind's in a state of hatred, aversion, and you see your enemy coming down the street, and it's painful to you. But it's only painful because you're in a state of hatred. If you weren't in a state of hatred, you wouldn't be feeling anything. And then, a spiritual feeling, positive one, ethical feeling, is you see somebody suffering and it's painful to you. So that's coming about because you're in a state of compassion. So you should act on feelings that are spiritual, that come about because you're in a skillful state of mind, and don't act on them that are worldly. So don't chase desires that just lead to addictions. Don't act on painful feelings that are just based in aversion. So when you see your enemy coming towards you down the street, recognise that it's that the pain is because you're in a hateful state of mind, and go, oh, I'm in a hateful state of mind. I'm treating that person as an object in my way, not as a human being. So if I try and treat them as a human being, then that feeling will change or sort of go away. So this is the same thing, put slightly differently. So we've got body and feelings, which are just presented to us. These are our experience. In the moment, there's nothing we can do about them. We just have them. But then our mind and our views are how we respond to things. So we do have control over these two. So the mind is kind of divided into emotions, which are basically often conditioned by feelings. So we have a feeling, and it tends to just habitually condition an emotion, like pain, aversion. But it doesn't have to, because our views condition our emotions as well. Because so if we have that example of seeing our enemy, and then we start to change our view about them, to be that they're a living being, then we change our emotion towards them. So there's something about aesthetic appreciation, I think, that is about taking all this in. So I think when we're just utilitarian, our view is that we've got this kind of fixed view that if I get this thing, this pile of wood or whatever, taking that example of the tree, then, I will be happy, things will, So there's a view, so the utilitarian view is that this limited amount of thing, if I get it, then that will bring me happiness. But actually the view, the Buddhist view is that all things are impermanent. insubstantial, and therefore unsatisfactory. So if we hold that view as well as, oh, it'd be useful to have that wood, then it's not that, we don't invest so much energy, emotional energy in it, and we're also ready when it goes. Oh, there'll be some element of us is kind of like, able to kind of let it go. So, so there's some sense in which an aesthetic life has this kind of, it's not so held, it's not so grasping or something. And I've done a bit of thinking about things like how poetry works and how kind of a metaphor, things like that work. And it's almost like with a metaphor, it's like you've got, so an example is poetry is a zoo. Blimey, I've got this. So Les Murray says poetry is a zoo. So it's like, why is it a zoo? Well, it's like a collection, So it's true. It's kind of true. Oops. It's true that poetry is a zoo in some sense, in some associative sense, right? So yeah, it's a bit like a zoo, but literally, it's not true. It's not a zoo. So I think what things like poetry and metaphor do is they create like it's a bit like a koan. You've got two truths going on at the same time. So what has to happen is that your mind, if it's going to take both seriously, it has to kind of be in here. It has to occupy this space, which is a sort of space of unknowing. It's like we don't. When we're literal about things, it's like we know. And when we're kind of like just vague about things, it's there's no focus. But somehow, with reality, we need to be in this kind of space where we're open. We're being open to things. We're opening ourselves to learn about things. So there's a really nice poem by Miroslav Holub, who's actually he's quite unique in that he's got a double career. He's quite a well-respected immunologist, and he's a very well-respected poet. So he's like a scientist and a poet at the same time. And in his poem Alphabet, he says, 10 million years from the Miocene to the primary school in Yenka Street, we know everything from A to Z. But sometimes the finger stops in that empty space between A and B, empty as the prairie at night, between G and H, deep as the eyes of the sea, between M and N, long as a man's birth. Sometimes it stops in the galactic cold after the letter Z, at the beginning and the end, trembling a little like some strange bird. Not from despair, just like that. So I think, maybe what we can do a bit in the week is like just trying to be a bit less kind of certain about things. Try a bit less certain about what is going to work in our practice, and try to sort of come back to what, just maybe remember that diagram, with the body feelings, what is happening in my body? Is that a condition for happiness? Am I just overriding it because I want to get something done, How are my feelings? Am I just overriding them? Am I just switching off from them? I think aesthetic appreciation is very much connected with ethical feeling. So it's a bit like it is, something we can cultivate. We can go and, we can go down the art gallery. We can get art house DVDs out. So maybe sort of try to do that sort of thing in the week. Give yourself a diet, which is all about cultivating this kind of ethical, aesthetic sense. Where you're going to become more attuned to the gaps between things, to the maybes and the I don't knows and all that sort of thing. And I think, when we can do that, it's a bit like, I think maybe this space, can inform us a bit. It can actually help us. It can influence us. It can help us relax. It can help us slow down, and it can help us actually make decisions that are a bit more, a bit wiser. A bit more all-inclusive. So that we're not just kind of going, right, this is what I need to do. So I said earlier about in Sangharakshita's chapter in Wisdom Beyond Words, he talks about pranya being metta. Metta is pranya. Pranya is metta. So I think with this, it's a bit like, well, we need these. We've got these two things that we need to bring about happiness. Loving kindness, we've got to want it, and then we've got mindfulness, how we bring it about, bringing mindfulness to ourselves, to others, so that we are mindful of everybody, and we do actually maximize our, the positive effects we're having on them. So it's a bit like the Buddhist path is this, isn't anything other than that. There's no place in which metta suddenly disappears or gets replaced by something else. Even though people think, oh, insight, that's some advanced sort of thing, But it's a bit like metta just becomes part of the view that we have, much more consistently, really, here, So it's a bit like this view becomes bigger and bigger, and it keeps including living beings all the time, more and more. So when in the Ratnaguna Samchayagata, in the next chapter, it talks about there's a quote. It says, "Call forth as much as you can of love, of respect, and of faith. Remove the obstructing defilements and clear away all your taints. Listen to the perfect wisdom of the gentle Buddhas, taught for the weal of the world, for heroic spirits intended." So that word faith in there is the Buddhist word is pasada or prasada. It's like Prasadu's, that's his name. So it's what it is. It's a lucid faith. It's like seeing clearly that this is the way forward. And the Buddhist path of the dhyanas, the kind of higher states of consciousness in meditation, that comes in at the second dhyana, which is the place of inspiration. But the dhyanas only come about through skillfulness. The first dhyana arises in dependence on skillful mental states and lack of obsession with sensory things. So it's a bit like, that lucid faith, that seeing things clearly, that brightness. Ratnaguna talks about it as a brightness, and like the little green leaves that come out in the springtime. It's like that beginner's mind, it's like, so that's what comes out of really focusing on living beings, wanting to help them, actually helping them, and then experiencing the joy of that. And then, further along, it just turns into wisdom, really. It just turns into when we're kind of completely skillful all the time, because we really believe in that is what needs to happen. It's not, it's not a random thing. It's a view we have. Then we do actually eventually bring, we are completely skillful once we've worked our minds to be able to do that. And that's represented by the fourth dhyana, which is talked about as a state of purity. But it's purity in the sense that we don't make a mess around it. We're just always making making something good out of the world. And when we have wisdom, we're not attached even to the good things that we bring about. So, we just keep bringing good things into the world, knowing that things dissolve and fall apart and all that sort of stuff. So in Sangharatita's chapter, what he recommends at the end is, getting a balance between the retreat type life, the aesthetic life, and the practical life. It says that if you go to one you can go to one extreme and the other. So you can go to the extreme of never really doing anything, having a completely aesthetic life and never really achieving anything or doing anything for anybody else. Or you can just be kind of just always doing, and you're kind of just stressing yourself out all the time. So the idea of this week is to be more, doing our normal, practical activities, but doing them within this context of like this more relaxed, spacious, aesthetic appreciation. And it's like going. If you're busy, then make sure you kind of keep withdrawing from it. Keep going into nature. Keep meditating. Keep meeting up with friends in a way which is just about friendship rather than about achieving stuff. But also, do take things on. You don't want to go to the other extreme. Sort of do have an effect on the world. Do make a difference. Maybe sort of, try and let the one inform the other. See if you can't actually try a bit harder with different areas in your life. So that's the kind of that's the ideal really in the Buddhist life, is having that kind of, there's two things going on at the same time. And in a way, it's a bit like here. We this is our experience, so we've got this spacious experience. But then we're just active as well, we're doing things, as well. Okay.